Ink-a-dink, 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 ink-a-dink. Wow.
Basil, what's the heck? It's what have you got Spuds on for? Now for those of you that didn't watch the most recent shows, we had Mitt Romney back on, and someone or something that purports to be Mitt Romney's chief campaign manager, who we know only by the name of Spuds. We're not quite sure. Sure, it's not Spuds McKenzie, but it's Spuds. And Basil, sorry for another day. What? Oh, okay. Oh, good evening. Welcome to Basil BuddhaCat Presents. My name is David Stevenson, co-host to Basil's co-host and interpreter. Center slot, of course, Basil BuddhaCat, and Basil has asked and has his invitation accepted for Marty Heiser to join us. Marty Heiser, who has his own show.
Thank you.
All you can do is pat Basil. You can't shake his paw.
I'm delighted to be sharing the set here with a cat. Is this a make-believe cat or is this a real cat? How am I to address this cat?
Well, first of all, I have to interpret for Basil because as folks that have been watching the show know, Basil doesn't speak English. And Basil's told me on many an occasion that he'd be happy to learn to speak English. But he friended a friend of Progressive Soup named John Kasumi, who's
Basil knows how to work a computer and has his own Facebook page?
Well, he has a Facebook page, and of course he has Basil BuddhaCat Presents. But when it comes to typing, I have to help Basil out occasionally with not only his spelling, but also his typing, because Basil, as he says, keyboards are not made for cats. Yeah. They do not make accommodations. They make accommodations for everybody else.
As a child, did you spend a lot of time alone?
Is this for Basil or for me?
For you. Because sometimes, when you're alone and the world seems like a big, dangerous place, you make up these make-believe friends, and you have a whole... And I'm just wondering if that's some of the thinking behind
Hold on.
Basil the cat and your obvious close relationship with Basil.
Basil says he believes in Puff the Magic Dragon, but he's going to make me admit that I don't. That I don't believe in Puff the Magic Dragon,
okay,
although I do.
So you do share
enjoy
a TV show with a cat, but you do draw the line at Puff the Magic Dragon.
But yeah,
it's good to know your parameters.
Neither Basil nor I, because Basil, as we've noted on the show, Basil, like myself, considers himself to be a devout Christian. Believes that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior. That's a religious point of view.
Yes.
We also share a philosophical point of view that both of us, as indicated by his name, we're both Buddhists philosophically, and there's really no great divergence between you can be a Christian religiously, certainly, and a Buddhist philosophically, because the teachings of the Buddha are very similar.
You're completely wrong. The Christian faith has an incredibly high value for the human being. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, they call it the Imago Dei. In Genesis, it says, God said, "Let us make man in our image." And so, from the Christian point of view, humans have the highest spectrum. And animals and plant life are there to serve humans. In other words, like even in the Garden of Eden, Adam was given the task of naming all the animals, and they're there to serve. But man is held in highest esteem. Just the human life is a reflection of God. And from the Buddhist point of view, you would know more than I, but my understanding of the Buddhists is that the ultimate idea is that you want to become one with the universe, that it's just a continual and through reincarnation and living a life that's at peace with the world, you can become finally just become one with the universe. Christianity.
Hold that thought for a second. I just need to answer this really quickly.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, Basil BuddhaCat Presents. Oh, it's Rick Santorum. Oh, could you hold on a second, Mr. Santorum? We're right in the middle of discussion. I'm going to put you on hold, and we'll get you back in the discussion in just a moment. Continue.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd just say, Rick, good job running your campaign, and I'm sorry to see that it's suspended for now. But let me just say this: he would be a good example because Rick Santorum has a child that's a special need child.
Yep.
And from the Christian point of view, even if you understand that your child maybe has Down syndrome, for example, in the case of Sarah Palin's grandchild or child,
one or the other.
But the idea is that every life is precious from the Christian point of view. There are those who would say that...
Buddhists equally. Certainly, Buddhists.
No, Buddhism. My understanding of Buddhism is that once you die, you just become part of this collective nirvana.
Nirvana, heaven. What's the difference? I mean,
there's a huge difference.
They're two words that essentially...
No, nirvana has to do with just losing your identity into the vast collective. The Christian point of view would say that God created you. As a matter of fact, he calls you his masterpiece. He says of you, David, he says, I have created you. You are my choice masterpiece, and I've created things for you to do. There's a verse that says in Philippians 2:10, it's something along the lines that you were created in the image of God to do good works that he prepared for beforehand. So you were knitted together in your womb. Every hair on your head has been numbered. This is from a Christian point of view.
Yeah.
The Bible says that, if you ask God for bread, he's not going to give you a snake. And if you ask God or he's not going to give you a stone. If you ask him for a fish, he's not going to give you a snake. That you are not only beloved, but he wants to call you his son, and his father.
The snakes are good. They taste like chicken, I understand. Basil's got a little point to the audience he wants to make. He says, hey, kids, don't listen to what Marty's saying, and don't stop what you're doing in terms of bringing your cats their food on demand 2, 3, 4 times a day, and changing the water dish, changing the litter pan, and doing other things to serve your Lord and Masters, which are your house cats. That's just what he's saying.
So you're elevating the cats to a position of authority above humans.
Who takes care of whom? Who gets to sit around and occasionally?
I have a cat at home,
and occasionally sleep.
He just arrogantly walks around and looks at you, and could not be bothered. So there's something going on behind those eyes.
Do you dare not serve your cat?
I serve my cat. I'm more of a dog guy than a cat guy. At the end of the day, a cat, basically plays with his duty in the what do they call those things? The clay pans, kitty litter. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm not a big cat guy. I have a cat. He's been living in the house for about 10 years now, and I do feed the cat.
Pretty authoritarian too, I imagine. But
the cat is in a sense cruel. Sometimes I'll come to the front door and there'll be a bunny head at the front door. So I don't hold out a majestic view of cat character as being this, elevated, wonderful thing. I think, they're basically just part of, the natural order of things, Darwinian survival of the fittest.
Okay. Basil's just saying, don't lump all cats together because even John Wayne Gacy, whom we know as a gentleman who I think.
Yeah, had about 15 boys in his crawl space.
Murdered people.
How are you going to tie this to cats?
Chopped them up, ate them. He says that even John Wayne Gacy's cat, I want to make sure I get this right, correct me if I'm wrong, Basil, even John Wayne Gacy's cat would not take a bite out of any of those kids because he understood the sanctity of human life too.
Well, I don't know about that, but my cat takes bites out of little baby robins and little bunnies, and you should see what the cat drug in at our house. But, this is more fascinating to me that you have this friendship with a cat. I think it says a little bit more about you than the cat. But, hey, to each his own.
Yeah, he's trying to put me on the couch. No, I'm not going to. No, it's all right. No. Anyway.
Tell me. No, but how were you potty trained? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, we're just going to have to take a moment here. I just want to get back with... Mr. Santorum, thanks for holding. We appreciate your hard work and effort, and certainly all our prayers go out to your family and to your daughter Bella, and appreciate the things. Now, I think Mr. Santorum knows that in my life, I've been an adoptive parent for special needs children, including my son.
There you go.
My son. So so that's but we appreciate your hard work and certainly keeping the conversation lively. And we know you're going to come out now and say that all the things you said about Mitt Romney were in the heat of the moment, if you will. But at any rate, and keep in mind now because I
love the vested sweaters. Could you mention that?
No, I could take or leave the vested sweaters. Okay. I mean, but thinking back to the 1980 Republican nomination.
You're going to talk about
process.
voodoo economics?
Well, yeah. Actually, during that process, during those debates between Ronald Reagan and George Bush, Bush did describe Reaganomics, which ended up in 8 years, added about $4 trillion of debt to our debt. As we were discussing that.
It added $4 trillion to the debt, but it doubled the revenues to the Treasury of the United States. By lowering taxes, counterintuitively, you lower taxes, you bake a bigger pie, and guess what? The government comes out looking great because the revenues to the government doubled. Unlike what we have right now, where revenues to the government are plummeting, increasing our debt.
But the same end result being that a lot of debt foisted upon our grandchildren and their children and so on and so forth. But at any rate, and of course only to be outdone by the debt incurred during 8 years of George Bush, after that little respite in between where we'll give Bill Clinton some credit, we'll give the Republican Congress some credit because they were there, it happened during their time, they worked together, they lowered debt for a few years and actually had a positive balance. At any rate, Mr. Santorum, thank you for calling in, and I just want to again convey all of our hope for you and your family and your daughter Bella. Thanks for calling. We'll talk to you again in another show.
No, it's interesting you bring up Ronald Reagan, which sometimes conservatives are always chasing that Reagan high, which
is pretty much. I don't want to say fictitious, this whole notion about Reagan, because there are 10 points that Republicans have, 10 litmus tests that Republican candidates have nowadays, and Reagan fails, I believe, on 6 of those 10 points. So he's a little different than this wonder child that we like to look back on.
Ronald Reagan was the best. We had up until now, the worst president in the history of the United States, Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter, you'll recall, had green energy initiatives, among other things.
Because of the Arab oil embargo, yeah.
Right, because oil was hard to come by, and we had to pay unstable Mideast governments. It sounds vaguely familiar to our situation right now.
It's been going on ever since then, through the entire 3 decades, almost 4 decades.
He had a foreign policy that was heavy on human rights, who are our friends and who aren't. And he had a leadership style that said that we as a country are in a malaise and that we've got to, somehow get out of this. And the country was divided. The country was unhappy. We had high fuel costs, if you could find the fuel. Remember those lines?
I remember the alternating days.
And basically, his policies of increasing government, increasing regulation, increasing taxation led to, as he would call it, a malaise. Some have said it's not unfamiliar to what we're going through right now. And I think what this country needs for a rebirth of freedom, we need another Morning in America. We need another Ronald Reagan. Now, if it's Mitt Romney, I hope it is, and let's see how this all works out.
Rule number 1 for a president, because a president, underneath all of what they do, is the head cheerleader for our country.
I agree.
And underneath all of what Jimmy Carter did, Jimmy Carter, even using the term malaise, you don't want to, if things are bad, you don't want to say things are bad. You want to say things, we have some issues, but we need to address those issues, and the country needs to rise above that. This is what Ronald Reagan did that we remember, is that the Morning in America, he spoke in a very cheerful, optimistic tone.
Yeah.
Which is great, because
grew up in Dixon, Illinois.
Likewise,
moved out to Hollywood.
Yep, likewise, Bill Clinton. Likewise, to some degree, George Bush. Certainly, President Obama speaks about the positivity of being in America.
When you talk about President Obama, this is one thing you would never ever see. Got these little microphones. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're on. You would never see Ronald Reagan reach over to the leader of Russia, rub his thigh and say, once I get this election done, I'll have more flexibility to, move some of those weapons out of Europe. And had the Russian Nedved, or whatever the guy's name is, I think he plays hockey for the Rangers, might be a different guy.
Different guy, yeah.
Don't worry, I will tell Alex or Vladimir what you say. You would never see Ronald Reagan reach over like that in a subservient gesture and rub the inner thigh of a Russian who, last time I checked, they weren't the nicest guys in the world. As a matter of fact, you see all this carnage in Syria? Guess where the Russian paratroopers are? Of anywhere they could go on the planet, they're in the airport in Syria backing that Assad guy. So these Russians aren't the nicest guys in the world, and you'd never see Ronald Reagan sell out a borderline treasonous gesture like we all saw on TV when he thought the mics were off.
I'm going to see if I can get Ollie North on the phone because there was a little event that took place, a little series of events that took place prior to the election of 1980 when Ronald Reagan took the presidency. There was a little issue with the hostages in Iran that had been taken.
And you know what Ronald Reagan said when he was asked on the campaign trail? He said, "I will not negotiate with barbarians." But that's exactly what he said.
But in the interim,
and America was like, "Whoa, we got a president that has a pair." And what did the Iranians do? The moment Reagan got there, they put those guys on a jet and send them back so fast it make your head spin.
But as we learned during the testimony from the Iran-Contra affair, after the fact, was that prior to the election, Reagan had his folks over in Iran, maybe not in Iran, but negotiating with the Iranians, wanting them to not release the hostages. For God's sakes, don't release those hostages while this guy's president, because those hostages are political capital for us. If you wait until after our guy is elected to release those hostages, we'll send you some weaponry. And sure enough, this is how the whole Iran-Contra thing evolved, including our Ollie North, who went. Did he go to prison or did he plea? Did he plea bargain out? Or did
I don't know. I just remember him in front of Congress in that Marine Corps.
He looked pretty spiffy.
Yeah, and they had some credit card things from a lingerie shop, and they thought they really had him because he was having some nefarious affair, extramarital affair, and buying lingerie for this assumed mistress. Well, if turns out it was tights for his daughter's ballet class.
If that's all he'd been doing, that would have been fine. But apparently, he was involved in this negotiating process.
No, my recollection of Iran-Contra. Mm-hmm. Was that the Iranians were continuing to hold hostages during the Reagan administration, which would put to the lie this concept that there was some nefarious secret plan of the elect Ronald Reagan campaign that brought down Jimmy Carter. If you're really serious about that, I think that's a bit of a speculation on your part. But basically, I think Jimmy Carter lost because the crime rate was at 20%. He was just a bad leader, and he thought government could solve every problem. And you had Ronald Reagan that came in, and he joked about the federal government, saying, if it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And it stops moving, subsidize it. I think those three principles could be held above the current administration right now, and we see the results of that. But the Iran-Contra problem was that my recollection was that the Iranians continued to hold hostages. They had hostages in Beirut or whatever, mm-hmm. and they had a what they call a mild portion of the Iranian government that would be willing to release those hostages, but they needed replacement parts mm-hmm. for all this weaponry that they got under the Shah. Right. So they were willing to send the replacement parts in exchange for money. And then there were these freedom-loving fighters down in, I think it was not Colombia. What was the other country down in?
Contras were in.
El Salvador, maybe.
I think it was either El Salvador or Nicaragua.
Nicaragua, El Salvador. So you had these freedom-loving.
Basil says he wasn't around them, but he's since read a lot about that and actually written a paper about it. He says
we need to really talk about these imaginary friends.
No, he says it was definitely El Salvador.
Okay, El Salvador it is. So they took the money, the revenues from the Iran-Contra transaction, mm-hmm. and funneled it down to the Contras, which was verboten as well,
right?
Because the Congress had passed the Boland something amendment.
The Congress had decreed that we
can't send money.
You can't
but
finance.
You could go out, and there were like private fundraisers, like Coors, of the Coors Brewing Company that would send money directly, and Oliver North would go down there. Because after all, they were trying to fight communism down there. And in the end, the anti-communists did prevail in Central America, in El Salvador and Nicaragua, and I think those countries are doing a lot better because they're not under the communist boot of some tin horn dictator.
35 years later, I guess things can get better. I think it's got better. It certainly got better in Vietnam, in the 80s and subsequently.
Generally speaking, can we agree that a government that has a free market and a democratically elected power structure is better than a totalitarian communist government?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's been U.S. foreign policy that's been a mistake, and every time it supports, whether it be the Shah of Iran, whether it be Saddam Hussein, who we supported in the war with Iran. Anytime the U.S. government, and this is where I think you and I and a fellow by the name of Ron Paul and all libertarians can understand and agree that our government should not take sides with dictators of any kind, and it's just contrary to what we believe in as Americans.
Sometimes it comes down to the devil you know rather than the devil you don't. A classic example would be Mubarak right now in Egypt. Okay, gosh, rotten guy, has this heavy-handed secret force and stuff like that. And why don't we have like a democratic spring, the Arab Spring, and let the people decide?
Right.
So the people, march, and now Mubarak's out, and out he goes. And who do we got now? We got the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, the Muslim Brotherhood was a precursor to Al Qaeda and some of these other things. So sometimes
I think they have a candidate in the election, but the point well taken. I think they have a candidate in the upcoming election, and they'll have some part of what'll happen. They'll have something to say about what happens in Egypt going forward.
Yeah.
But I would contend that if you have moderates in the majority, as you'll probably have in Egypt, that you won't have any radicals from any point of view running the government of Egypt, and it will in fact ultimately be better than what we had under Hosni Mubarak. We'll have more like what we had
from your lips to God's ears. I hope that works out. But I think when you're dealing with foreign policy, and a lot of times there are no great decisions that you can make. But at the end of the day, if you have someone who's an ally, it's generally speaking better to continue to support an ally unless it's completely egregious.
Okay, I'm just listening to what Basil's saying too.
What is Basil's take on international relations?
Basil wants to focus. He's focusing specifically on Egypt, and he's looking backwards, these many thousands of years back to the dynasties of Egypt.
The Sphinx, you're saying?
No, he's actually, the point he's making
could that have been his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather there that modeled for the Sphinx next to the pyramids?
No, he says that actually it's a much more distant relatives than that. But he says that the
cats have been around a while.
The cats in Egypt were idolized, were adored, were held in.
They still play with their poops and bite off bunnies' heads.
Extremely. Well, no, cats are much cleaner than that. Basil says. Basil says he's leaving the poop scooping to you humans, and he actually says that most cats, in fact, catch birds and bunnies and squirrels. They send out. They have a secret army of humans that they send out to do that. But Basil's saying that we need to go back. Egypt needs to go back specifically. Back to those days of thousands of years ago, and adore cats. And I'm not sure whether it's Basil. It might be Eric von Daniken. It's the guy that talks about aliens and all that stuff, and that says that something about if you look at the hieroglyphs in Egyptian language, the pictograms.
Yes.
That you'll find that a lot of those pictograms actually resemble cats in spacesuits.
There you go.
That are actually the race of cats that came to Earth. Now, he says cats have some cats have degenerated since then, and aren't really quite of that nature of the cats that came to Earth in spaceships and guided Egypt through their amazing building of the pyramids.
So it was cats from outer space that helped put together the pyramids. Double check that with Basil,
he's saying that they certainly had more to do with it than those stupid humans.
You know, one thing about cats, if you go to like YouTube and things like that, you know which has like millions and millions and millions of views is videos about cats. What is it about you cat people that you have such an infatuation with this particular animal?
He says
you go out into the country.
He says those numbers are all fake. Those numbers, everything, all these YouTube claims about numbers
like
of,
cute cat, cat sleeps with dog. I mean, it's crazy.
First of all, he wants to differentiate between hits and views. Because a hit doesn't mean anything. All it means is you click on, you put words into Google or any other search engine, and you'll get something which comes up on the queue. That's a hit. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean you paid any attention to it. That just means it became an opportunity for you to view. The views count.
Well, so if you put this show up on YouTube, you might get 14 hits. If you put cute cat rustles with dog, you'll get 13 million hits.
I saw that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that's nuts.
What does
that say about America? What does it say about you? What is it with these cats? Do you know what they do in Montana when a cat has a litter of kittens?
They kill them all, probably.
They kill them all. A burlap sack and a brick, and you throw them in a.
That's what women used to do with their babies back in the days before legalized abortion.
Now we're getting back to Christianity, where the human beings are elevated because they're made in.
But they do the same thing as humans do with cats, though. I mean, this has been going on.
A cat is a cat, and a human is made in God's image. I see a distinction. I'm sorry, Basil, but there is a distinction.
Basil says that the next time he runs into God, whether it be the God that came down from in outer space in a spaceship, which looked like a cat, the next time he sees God or gods, for those of us that are polytheists, and Basil's not, but he recognizes that a lot of folks are polytheists. They worship multiple gods. They worship the earth. They worship things of a more tangible nature than what you or I or even Basil sees as being God.
Yes,
this ethereal concept. Basil says next time he runs into God, he'll check it out and he'll let us know, because he'll see God. I want to make sure I get this right. He says he'll see God a lot sooner than either of you folks will.
It just struck me talking about listening to your cat. Who was that guy that murdered a bunch of people back in the 70s in New York City, and he was locked up?
The 40 whatever caliber killer, Dave Berkowitz.
Dave Berkowitz. Now, didn't he say that the dog told him to kill these people or something like that?
It was his neighbor's dog, Sam, apparently.
Okay, so now follow me on this, because he would listen to an animal that would talk to him.
Okay, it's important because behind the camera we have actually a random. I can't say the two words. You'll have to see it in the end credits, but it's a snark hound. Basil describes him as being a snark hound.
But I'm just saying, I'm a little concerned about you, David,
Snarky's clapping.
Because David Berkowitz would listen to animals and hear them talk, and he went out and killed people. I'm wondering, are there any loaded firearms in your house, or are you otherwise a peace-loving person? And is this like a bit of a leap from David Berkowitz to David A. Stevenson?
Now we're going to have to check off from this conversation. We're going to take a couple minutes. We're going to come back and do our Sunday morning show. And our Sunday morning show takes a little bit more of a religious note. So this has been Basil BuddhaCat Presents. I'm David Stevenson, Basil's co-host and interpreter and gopher. And our good and dear friend Marty Heiser, and we're going to come back and do a little bit more religious discussion. Thanks. Good night.
They say they'd rob your grandma blind on Wall Street, fritter her away her Medicare on Wall Street, and Pharma Oil and their pet fox don't care if she lives in a box, so long as they wear platinum jocks on Wall Street, Meow.